What's the biggest risk you've ever taken?
Coming on this podcast. Yeah, so Kimberly Clark you'll find on the back of toilet paper, and you'll find it on the back of the Kleenex tissues you use to wipe your nose. You'll see it in the dispenser, in a stool, in a toilet.
And without wanting to have a pun, it's not to be sniffed at.
Exactly.
It's a 100-and-something-year-old.
Yeah, it's a multi-billion-dollar organisation, 150 years plus in existence. It's the inventor of toilet paper.
Is it? Hello, everybody, and welcome to number 5 of the UnEDited podcast with me, Ed Gould, and this one is all about storytelling and sales and marketing. Aren Grimshaw is a friend that comes in to join us today, and I've been listening back to our chat, which I recorded a couple of months ago, and it reminded me about the brilliant way in which Aren focuses on storytelling, the way that he brings teams together between sales and marketing for greater effect, and his insights and honesty about how you make moves as a marketeer in an organization like ZF Group, which is a huge organization that deals in engineering and automotive parts. So if you are a marketeer, a salesperson, someone trying to get into the industry, or maybe somebody that's already in the upper echelons of our sector, then this is a great podcast to give yourself a reminder about what good looks like. It is season 2, and we're up to episode 5, but I want to say thank you to everybody so far who's got in touch about the episodes we've done already. Yes, you can be on the UnEDited podcast. All you have to be is relevant, interesting, honest, and open. So if you think you or someone you know should be featured on the UnEDited show, get in touch today. And remember, every time you subscribe, share, and listen, it makes a real difference to all the effort put in by me and Louis. Shout hello, Louis. Hello. He's the invisible man. Okay, let's run podcast. Sit back, relax, and run the next UnEDited show. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Black Box Studio for another edition of the UnEDited podcast. And this one's a little bit different. We're deep diving into how you build the right sort of functions in marketing and how you can create agile environments that actually perform well. And my guest today has spent a lifetime, well, half a lifetime maybe, we'll discuss his age later, doing this in a number of different businesses. So Aren, can you start? I always say, tell us who you are, give us a bit about your background. Let's warm up into the conversation.
Thank you, Ed. I'm Aren Grimshaw. I work at a company called ZF. I'm the global head of integrated marketing with them. In terms of my kind of background, I've spent many years in consultancy with my own kind of small agency, often working with small to medium-sized enterprises. And I started from a sales kind of background originally, frustrated by marketing not delivering what I thought was right for me to sell or right for my customers to buy. And so that's what really led me into the marketing world originally.
Well, you were telling me off camera earlier as well. It goes back even further. You're a natural communicator because you were a published journalist at a very young age as well. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that, or is that a secret?
No, it's fine. I'm happy to talk about it. So, yeah, I mean, I was one of those kind of young, disruptive young people who has an opinion on everything and wanted to change the world. I was very idealistic. So I got involved in youth politics very early on and was involved in kind of, trying to improve things for young people in Cornwall, which is how I kind of got started with communication. And then I decided to kind of start doing some of the media stuff. Had a really good media studies teacher who encouraged me to write for the school newspaper. And then from that, I decided to launch a political campaign to try and get a university in Cornwall, try and get Objective One funding for Cornwall and some of these things. And as a result of that, I got 350 students to refuse to go to classes for a day and got the entire world's media to turn up on my school and film it and get it into the papers. And from that, I got my first column in a newspaper and stuff like that.
So a natural communicator from a young age with an opinion, trying to find ways of connecting. And that's often a great route into the world that we're in. But tell us a little bit about your work history then. So you've been a consultant, but you've also been dropped into really big organizations doing really interesting things. So to give our listeners a bit of context about kind of why they get you in and what you do, tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, my background, as we've mentioned, I come from Cornwall in the far southwest of the UK. Historically, incomes have been very low in that part of the world. I didn't go down a traditional education pathway, so I didn't do college, I didn't do university. And so my chances to earn an income were constrained, to say the least. I also chose to have children very young, so I had my first child when I was 18.
Wow.
And so I needed to now find a way of making an income while also doing something that I enjoy, also something that's going to be able to provide for my family in the long term. And so that kind of led me to have to work on my own, to set up my own kind of business or enterprise. And so originally, I mentioned to you before we started, I started with sales, but I wanted to get into marketing. So I had to take kind of hybrid roles at first. And then when things changed and that agency went away, I actually got an opportunity to go and work with one of the people from the agency that I was in. And I was the salesperson for that agency, working in a kind of hybrid PR role, running the call center, that type of stuff. And I said, look, I'll sell for you if you teach me marketing. And that led me to set up my first consultancy right back in 2004, so 21 years ago now. And that gave me an opportunity to work with all sorts of different clients, because Cornwall attracts all sorts of weird and wonderful businesses. Many, global enterprises are based in Cornwall. You wouldn't know it. And so from that, I ended up working with lots of different companies on that basis as a consultant, built my own kind of small agency, would sometimes go in and contract in to a company, work there for a number of years or months, and then come back to my own agency. And all the time, my business partner would then be, running alongside, running some of those clients. So that's how I kind of ended up going down that route.
And in that time, what were the sort of the type of work you were doing? I mean, we talked earlier a little bit about there's a big tourism sector, obviously,
Yes.
down there. It's probably what Cornwall's known for. But maybe the other angle on that is these big companies that go into there because it's a good place to place your company. What sort of businesses were you working with in those days?
So it was very varied, and the work was very varied. So when I first started out, it was pre the kind of digital revolution, if you want to call it that. So, I started in the very, basics of marketing, print stuff, writing direct mails, and also selling for clients. But because I had that background, they often hired me to do a hybrid kind of thing. So I would do some selling, some marketing, effectively.
And you mentioned before this sort of idea of small companies often have really good generalists and big companies often have specialists. And actually one of the things you can bring, I think, as a consultant into those environments is being able to be flexible and agile in what you're doing and how you're working. Was that kind of part of the MO of what you guys did? Was that the proposition?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the other thing you mentioned before we came in, the whole idea of, marketing is about pinching ideas from other areas and applying them somewhere else.
Absolutely.
And that's what consultants are great at, because you're working with such a variety of clients, and you're also, if you're somebody who's naturally curious, interested in the world, you're consuming lots of ideas, reading lots of ideas, and then trying to mix and match them and try them in new areas. And so one of the things that really helped me take off with my business was very kind of early on I read some of the stuff that was coming out about kind of collaborative networks of people, use of social media that hadn't yet been called social media. And I could see the world changing to a very different kind of model. And so I actually went and took a role working with a web development company. Again, this was a role I took on board, went in and worked in-house. And from that, I started to apply some ideas around, thought leadership, as it's called now. It wasn't called that at the time. So bringing some of the PR and media background, I was writing features on behalf of the managing director that were placed into kind of industry magazines, that type of stuff. And because he had all of the knowledge about technology and innovation, we were able to do some, the first kind of virtual parties and things like this to launch stuff. We then got involved with Twitter really early on, were part of the Twestival organization that organized charitable events all around the world. And so that formed a name for both myself and the company around kind of digital technology, social media. And then that company, we managed to double the average order value in 6 months. And then within a very short time, that company ended up, winning a multi-million pound contract. It's now a very large agency with, 50, 60 employees working for some of the world's biggest companies. And so those kind of early wins give you that opportunity to show what you can do.
It's also about keeping your eye out. I think you said stay curious, which Louis in the background of this room will sigh at the sound of that, because I send a stay curious message on Teams every day to everybody with a different link to say, just bloody look at this, keep your mind open. And when you spot those things, the beauty of what you're talking about is if you don't, like me, have degrees and you don't have qualifications, you've got to look for the opportunity, jump on it and make the most of it. And I think that sort of appetite for making stuff happen sits at the center of consultancy and agency life. And, you need people that are willing to see it, grab it, use it and run with it. So, and you can pivot. Suddenly you're an expert in digital, and earlier on you were. So that's really interesting. So when did it start moving into the life you've got now in terms of those really big companies like Kimberly-Clark you've worked for, and obviously ZF. So what was that sort of transition like?
It was very difficult at first. I never planned to go into large matrixed organisations. I don't know if anybody ever sets off and says, "Hey, that's what I want to do." Work in large matrixed
I think some people do. I know, amazingly, but yeah.
And so an opportunity came up. A friend of a friend connection first said, there's a role going at Kimberly-Clark, and it was a communications role. If you're interested, go and have a chat with the VP and see where it goes. And I remember thinking, well, I'm never going to get this role. I'm from a marketing background predominantly. Okay, I've got comms in my background, but comms isn't how I saw myself. So I didn't expect to get the role. And then I had a great conversation with the VP, and I was brought in, and I was immediately told to organise a leadership event in 3 weeks at Chelsea football ground. And that was my big first project. And luckily I pulled it off. And then as a result, I was offered the role of comms business partner for EMEA, which I didn't take up, actually. I left and went and worked at another big website company for about 6 months. And then they called me back in to do another project. So actually my route in was often project-based.
Yeah, dipping a toe, showing value, showing that you're going to do what you say when you say you're going to do it, all those sort of tropes that are really important to those brands. So Kimberly-Clark, to give some context on it. So do you want to give us a bit of context? Because it's probably a name that maybe people, you summed it up very well earlier. Where might we have spotted the name Kimberly-Clark if you don't know it?
Yeah, so Kimberly-Clark you'll find on the back of toilet paper, and you'll find it on the back of the Kleenex tissues you use to wipe your nose. You'll see it in the dispenser, in a stool, in a toilet. And so you don't necessarily connect it with its brands like Andrex, Kleenex, Scott.
And without wanting to have a pun, it's not to be sniffed at.
Exactly.
It's a 100-and-something-year-old, multi-billion, 50 billion, or I don't know where it is now, but it's huge, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a multi-billion dollar organisation, 150 years plus in existence. It's the inventor of toilet paper.
Is it?
So, yeah, actually, it owns that as well.
That's a hell of a statement. So before Kimberly-Clark, imagine what you were doing. So thank you, the guys at Kimberly-Clark. So what did moving into that environment, first of all, with those projects, and then later in a more full way, what did that teach you, and what did that make? What did that bring to you as a marketeer and as a communicator?
What did it bring to me? At first, a lot of frustration because I'm used to, in a small business, everybody does a little bit of everybody's role. There are so few hands that things you have to muck in and do stuff together, and so you have quite a broad knowledge of how things connect, and you're usually able to do other people's roles. And so I brought that kind of mentality when I came in, and because I'd never heard the lingo, the names of the roles.
It's mad, isn't it?
The structure.
It's so alien.
Yeah.
The politics and the sort of how people talk when you first go into those places. I can remember feeling very alien, very out of place. But you've done it for much lot. You've succeeded. So I guess a big part of what I was interested in digging into is in Kimberly-Clark and also where you are now. But how do you build out that marketing function, and how do you keep some of that agile mentality, and how do you build out capability so that actually works effectively in a space which is so siloed and because obviously it's a house of brands. What sort of things were you doing there to sort of help them make marketing connect in that way?
So when I took on the integrated marketing leader role for EMEA, it was really about trying first to get everybody to understand the wider context. So I had a very small team there. I had a couple of commercialization managers. We would also call them integrated marketing managers later on in the process. A couple of people kind of more involved in a particular technology or content, for example, so a content writer, a marketing automation specialist. And so what I needed to do first was the default position often in these larger companies is things get farmed out to agencies. And I started
Which
to
is
see,
fine by me, by the way.
yes, I know, and obviously for me as well. All those years, being on that side. But here I felt that there wasn't enough necessarily always understanding of exactly what the agency was doing for them. So I take a basic example. Building a LinkedIn audience. That is something they would outsource to the agency, and there would be very little review of what that audience might consist of.
And did that come from a lack of internal understanding of what they were trying? Was it still at a time when that seemed hard? And because it'd be unlikely a brand would ask an agency to do that today, I guess. I don't know. Do you do that today with agencies? I'm not sure, but it seems like a more in-house, over time development of an audience on a key channel like that. But what's your reading of that?
Well, to me, I think that if you're asking an agency to do something, you really need to have some past experience in having had done it yourself. So you know what good looks like. You need to have a very clear idea of what work is going into that and what outcome you're expecting. And with something like a LinkedIn audience, most of that is generally, in my experience, farmed out to an agency, because you ask an agency to run a campaign for you and you say, I want you to find me the audience, I want you to do the creative for me, and then I want you to launch it, run it, report back on it. And so the usual kind of agency review process will be they build the audience and then maybe show you and say this is the volume of that audience. But what I was trying to show the team is actually, the tools within there enable you to analyze and look at that audience and see if it consists of the right people. So I actually had this happen this week. An agency built an audience, went into the audience, and I look at the names of the company. So on LinkedIn, you can look at the companies that.
Yeah, it's
that are in
really
the
easy to do. You just open the.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the first 2,000 people in the audience, or the highest group for where that audience was in our own company.
Because it's the algorithm's just going to look for that. Yeah.
Because it was saying,
and they
automatic parts.
hadn't excluded those roles and those people.
Yeah, and I'm sure they probably would have,
I bet they have now.
They have now, yes.
Yeah.
But we're still, all of our competitors were also listed in the company list because, again, they would match that criteria. And then when you looked, actually it was all the OEMs. So original equipment manufacturers, I don't want to use the acronym. So we actually are trying to sell to the independent aftermarket. That's a lot of what we're doing, obviously, at ZF. We already sell to the OES, the OEMs, etc. So when you look at it, then almost none of this audience would have been the right audience. Yeah, and so
you're just spending, because you're talking about paid campaigns, I guess, as well.
Yes.
So you're just spending in the wrong place, and you can get a nice vanity stat from that, and they'll come back. The agencies like us go, ta-da, and we put a number up. But actually, unless there's the acumen and understanding internally to own that. And what I would say to you as an agency is we're crying out for the people that we work with to understand what they're asking us to do. Because the other side of it is you bang your head against a wall and they go, oh, I didn't know that's what and the program falls apart because of that. So building up that capability, and we'll come on to ZF and that a bit more to contextualize it for our listeners, but in terms of that capability forming agile marketing teams that really understand, were you surprised at what you had to do to get the level up within those organizations, or was it just about connecting the dots between talented people in the teams, or how were you creating that functioning, that marketing function that actually delivers the goods?
So, I mean, the best part about these kind of things is when you start to show individuals what's possible, actually they light up, because we go into marketing because we want to do creative things. We want to solve problems. We want to do the best for our company or client if we're on an agency side. And so when you suddenly give them the tools to do that and you say, look, did you know this tool can do this? They suddenly now really engage. They want to build every audience. They want to test their theories. What happens if we change that job title, or we put in this function overlay, or, can we actually just match to specific companies? What does that data tell us? And actually it became a thing that, now all of the teams wanted to be involved in that. And we saw it also as a source of information. So, when it's being outsourced, it's just a route to define an audience, to sell a product, to show your advertising to. Suddenly it becomes now another source of information that you can use to...
It's insight.
And
understanding. And, there's... I can't remember who said it, but there's one of the original American advertising kings talked a lot about how close can you get your product to the customer, and how close is that line? And as marketeers, and doesn't matter if you're in a massive organization, if you're out there and you're in Coca-Cola or you're in an agency, the industry, marketing, creative technology as a whole, does have a tendency to overcomplicate things. We love a brand, so let's brand a new word for the same thing that happened last year. And all of that adds weight into that line between the product and the customer. So I've found in those larger organizations, sometimes the people are quite far removed from that. So connecting them to that sort of insight and that sort of understanding, I think it can be transformational for people that might not have ever actually done real marketing, which is understanding the customer and understanding how to frame your product. Did you find that your background as a consultant and someone that was more generalist was important in that role?
Yeah, I think it's not just the background as a consultant. I mean, again, you'll know this if when you're working as a consultant or in an agency, you often get asked to do speaking gigs. So you spend a lot of time standing up and doing free training for people.
Well, we're doing one now.
Exactly. That also led to me teaching in Falmouth University. So I taught, on the advertising degree, particularly digital marketing and social media. And I'd done that for other companies as well. So all of that can be brought to bear. But I'd also done a huge amount of mentoring people in roles in Cornwall as well. And so you can suddenly bring all that to bear with your team. So you've got all this kind of experience across different types of sector, different sizes of business, and you can bring all of that together then with all the different skills you've had to use over that career. And then that can really help you develop the team, develop their capability. And I think I said to you before we came in here, what I'm looking for more is that curiosity, as you pointed out. It's the aptitude, it's those kind of qualities, growth mindset, that's more important than the skills. The skills you can teach. And people usually, especially marketing people, are going to really appreciate you investing the time to improve their capability, to show them new things, and it gets them firing up their mind and thinking how they can apply that in different places, and that's how you get innovation and moving forward.
I think in big business, often they're hiring for specific experience and they're not hiring for that aptitude to change, but they've got the most chance of training on those skills. They've got the budgets, they've got the infrastructure, and the reality of the speed at which our world is changing. Anyone that comes saying they know where it's going to go in the next 5 years is absolutely lying through their teeth. So I'd far rather, and we're going through the transformation here of trying to think, how do we create marketeers? Or no, it's not even marketeers. How do we create people that are flexible and focused on growth and what the client needs to achieve? And a lot of that is being interested enough in the problem and the market, and that is a hard thing to get people to understand. They go, I want to do design, or I want to do that. And so we do tend here, I share your view in this. It's not always easy to do, but trying to find those people that are curiosity as standard. I would say there's one hovering in the dark. I mean, if you're listening to this online, you won't be able to see us. But if you're watching, just behind this camera, there's some trainers I can see at the bottom of a desk. But Louis is probably one of the best people I've hired in ages, and one of the reasons he hasn't got a degree, hasn't got expectations, but is hungry and wants to learn as much as he can in any way and turn his hand to things. I hope you're smiling. You should be. But that's a really hard thing to do when you are airdropped in to a big environment. So Kimberly Clark, and then we'll come on to ZF, but one of the things I wanted to sort of touch on is agility versus in scale. What we are as agencies and consultants, we're the engine that gets stuff done, and it's like, okay, we'll get them to get something done. How do you create that environment in the place? Because that's something that you're known for and something that you do a lot of. How do you create that environment of constant innovation, change in some of the biggest organizations that I think exist?
It's very difficult to do. I can only say that. And
he solved all the problems, guys.
I'd love to say.
What are the wins and what are the losses? What's the good, the bad, and the ugly of that sort of effort?
The good is that you can show teams how they can work together outside of a silo and deliver value much more quickly than they ever thought possible. That's the wins. The kind of downside of that is there's no downside of doing it. There is just, I suppose, you've got to have sticking power to really move that forward, because there's going to be a lot of resistance, and there's a lot of processes in a matrixed organization of any kind. Governance, compliance are very important factors, and you've got to have that front and mind at all times. And so when you're trying to move fast and break things, the typical comment, you can't therefore get around the compliance angle. And there are lots of things that have to happen in a particular sequence, particularly if you're doing, let's say if we are producing something, and it's being produced for the first time, there is a time that it needs to actually be designed, built, tested, and you have to test it both, internally and in the market before you can launch it. And so the kind of downside is that the Agile is not always going to work in that way, because you're going to have a dependency that the product actually needs to be available and in your distributor's hands in order to be able to fulfill an order. And so you could potentially move faster because you haven't had that key step of making sure first you've got the dependency that the product is available.
Mm. And I guess the word agility is a loaded word in business after sort of, I think 37 Signals. There was a development house called this. They created. Write in if you remember what they made, but it was like a bit of a forerunner to Monday.com. It was like a project management tool. But they really were the ones that coined that agility and in the sense of software development. And so, the idea of sprints, the idea of putting those sort of frameworks in place works well on software. But obviously, project managers, and I used to have a client, a Nordic company I used to work for, Kando, that's a big project management company. So I learnt the language, but the language became everything. It was like agility everywhere, and it's agility in every, the expectation is you're going to have agile project management systems going everywhere. Is that practical in every type of environment that you've been in, or is what you're saying is it just doesn't fly in some situations, or how do you read that? Someone that's been trying to do that.
Yeah, so for me, it's more important that people understand the principles of Agile, and when I say understand, I mean know and feel that open communication,
the behaviours
iterative development,
accepting that things are being worked on in an agile way and not chasing people up every 2 seconds. It's the conditions.
Even in the team, it's like understanding that it's about delivering value often and in increments, and then not necessarily having to deliver perfection the first time. But that's also sometimes difficult with the management structure, as you say, because they won't necessarily be thinking that. They're still, they'll tell you progress over perfection, but at the same time, they expect perfect when you come into the room and present it to them. So you do have to do work with both, managing up and in terms of the team to get them to understand what the key principles of Agile are, and then to work in that way, collaborative working, communicative, iterative. You can add the words, the frameworks and everything else after, but generally I find the ways of working are often more the bit that releases the most value to the organization first.
So if one of our listeners is here and they're working in an organization where they've got disparate teams all over the place, and I'm saying this because I know that's what you're in at the moment. You've got people delivering marketing and sales and brand activity in different teams in different places. What advice would you give to them to try and create success through a more agile methodology of approaching the challenges that they've got? Is there anything they could start thinking about doing in their own practice?
I suppose it's always good to have like a quick win. So, my first kind of use of Agile in an integrated marketing team was back at Kimberly-Clark. And it was for a very specific reason that at the time I didn't have any budget to spend on something. It was like second half of the year. I need you to deliver something. You can't have any budget. Work out a way of doing it. And so,
magic wand time.
Yeah, magic wand time. And so, out of necessity, I brought together some salespeople, some marketing people, and we said, okay, what can we do?
With what we've got.
With what we've got. What's a big idea? And the one that we had was all around sustainability. And it was taking, a tool that had been developed somewhere else in Excel. Could we use that tool, develop it to do more than it was doing? Can we build a campaign around it? And in the sessions, we said, okay, we were literally writing the email and then somebody else would say, like, all right, okay, I'll go off and perfect that email. I'll go off and design some ads. I'll go off and do that, and then we'd come back, like, daily stand-up or whatever, and we were just delivering immediately and trying to get something into the market as quickly as possible. So if you've got some kind of opportunity or necessity,
or even if you take one of the, I mean, my experience is everyone's got I'm going to call it a hit list, but you could put an S in front of that if you were naughty, but of all of the things that they're trying to do. And one of the great things is just to take one of them that you're not getting to, give it to a team and see what they do. Because my experience is, I bet your team loved that when they did that. I bet they were scared at first, and then by the end of it, they're coming into their stand-ups in the meeting going, actually, we've worked something out here. This is something that we can do. So it's especially in larger organizations, just trying to get marketing, everyone feeling the buzz all the time. That's half the battle. And taking those sorts of approaches to projects, you can do it internally, you can do it with partners that can bring those in. It's fun. It's a word that we shouldn't use, but you should though, shouldn't you? And out of fun comes good results often. So I think that's a really good example. But are there, I guess, the tropes of that, or the transferable sort of things are the stand-ups, are keeping in touch, not letting the project drift off in a different direction because they've been dragged back into other stuff. So do you think there's an element, if we're thinking about this advice we give someone else, is it worth picking something small and deliverable with inside a certain set window so it doesn't become completely overwrought on everything that you're doing? Is that the sort of idea that you would give?
Yeah, I think so, because, I mean, in one of these large kind of organizations, you're often not going to get dedicated team members for any period of time. So I didn't have dedicated team members.
They'll just get pulled off in a different direction. And
yeah, so this group of people I'm talking about that worked on that particular one at Kimberly-Clark, included the head of marketing for UK and Ireland, included the central continental Europe head of marketing, included a couple of big sales leaders, then included some of the integrated marketing team. They're only going to be able to give 10% of their time maximum to this project. And again, it didn't start with a massive scope. The whole point was the scope was defined in the actual Agile approach. We sat down together and drew up a backlog, of user stories effectively, and then worked through them, and then iteratively improved from there. So I suppose you can apply Agile into your day-to-day working, and it may not be you forming an Agile team to deliver one specific Agile project, but I think it works far better when it's just integrated into your general way of working, and you know when you can go into an Agile mode. But again, it's that incremental, iterative improvement, all of that.
And for us, it's also making sure everyone's on the same page at the beginning of it. So as a team that gets brought in, I guess by definition, the majority of agencies are probably thinking broadly in Agile terms of how they develop, because you get the brief, you don't really know what you're doing, you dig into the brief, you come back and you check it, are you in the right direction, you start your ideas, you try and think about what they are. That's totally transferable internally. We talk a lot about this proposition of where marketing connects, and the more and more we think about modern marketing and all the people that are involved in that, I think your example is great, because salespeople are part of that. Everyone stopped going this sales marketing divide that we talk about a lot on this pod. But, even the engineers, whoever you can bring into that can bring value into that journey. So I think that mindset is something that as technology changes what we're doing, it's become more important. How do we share those ideas between each other? How they get made might change completely, but where are we targeting and how are we doing that in a way that everyone signs up to? The other great benefit of your approach is the people that you've just described that were in that room. You had buy-in for that no matter what, because there was enough seniors in there to say, yeah, I was part of this. I did 10% of my time. 10%, the magic number. It's something that from my side as an agency person, we probably get maximum 10% of your time. And so everyone's got so little time in this. There's so much expectation that Agile also is really useful in that situation, because you need those bite-sized sort of moments. So I want to pause and talk about ZF and give us a bit of context about where you are now. But before we do, It's season 2 of the UnEDited podcast. I gave you a wink on this. We don't know what's going to happen, but Louis, the aforementioned Louis that sits in the dark and films this and puts it all together and is the producer, has his very own feature, which we're now going to listen to with some quick-fire questions, and who knows what's going to come out of Louis's mouth.
No time to think. No messing around. Get your answers ready. It's Louis' lightning round.
High production values on that feature. Excellent, Louis. So we're going to go for number 1. So you just got to give me an answer, whatever this is.
What's the biggest risk you've ever taken?
Coming on this podcast.
I don't believe that for 1 second. Leaving Cornwall?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Moving to Croydon. I think
Moving
that's probably
to Croydon
higher, to be
is
honest,
the
yeah.
biggest risk.
Yep.
Okay, let's do another one.
You can have a drink with anyone, alive or dead. Who would it be?
John Lennon.
Why?
Because I like his music.
Because he's a great alcoholic. No, yeah, absolutely.
What advice would you give to your younger self?
Get a proper job.
Well, you've got a proper job. So you think back to where you are now and what you're doing now, and you look back at the guy in Cornwall kicking a can down a street with nothing. I grew up in the country too.
Okay.
So just to make, I'm allowed to use these rural slurs upon it, but not much going on. No university, no college. Do you think you would change anything of how you've approached life? Would you give yourself a warning on anything?
I think I probably, I don't regret not going to university from a career perspective, but because I love knowledge and love learning things, I miss the fact that I never had that opportunity and didn't get to.
Do you sometimes toy with the idea of open university or doing something like that? Because that's where every few years I go, I really should, and then I don't because life is so busy. But it's a funny thing, isn't it? Because everything's geared up towards that sort of system. And I think there's a lot of people, especially in my world, the creative world, that don't fit that. They don't fit that cast. And the idea that the whole system is geared on, I'm going to hire someone because they've gone to the right university or they've got the right family or they've got the right. It is crazy. And when we think back to what you were talking about a second ago, hire the people that have got the right attitude and hire the hungry ones, not the expectant ones.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
One last one. I don't know which. If this repeats, we'll have to edit it out, even though this is unedited. Let's see if it's the wrong one.
What's your go-to karaoke song?
I can't remember. Is it David Gray, Babylon?
Oh God. Okay.
That's the last time.
That
The
is-
last time I did any karaoke. It was so long ago.
Stop the pod. It's done.
I don't do karaoke.
David Gray is back with a new single. You can find that. Okay. So thank you, Louis. Round of applause for Louis. Excellent work. Thank you for those questions. But let's move forward to where you are now. And I want to talk a little bit about the subject of performance marketing and also sort of operating your methodology of marketing within what is a real big engineering first business. So tell us a bit about where you are now and what you're up to.
Okay, so I'm within ZF Aftermarket, which is the division of ZF that's responsible for selling in the aftermarket. There's 4 different business lines we split ourselves into. So we've got passenger car, commercial vehicles, industrial, which includes off-highway, rail, marine, and then we've obviously got digital solutions, which is software-based, software and hardware mixed.
And the context of ZF for people that aren't in the market and don't know what it is, another huge business, but give us a bit of a background.
Yeah, it's a multi-billion dollar organization in predominantly kind of automotive sector, but as I mentioned, those kind of different applications.
Mobility as
mobility more generally. So our role is all about maximizing mobility uptime. That's the kind of key way of summing it up. And the aftermarket, is the part of the business at the moment that is thriving. Obviously, we're all the massive challenges there are in the automotive market at the moment. There are lots of people keeping their cars on the road for longer.
Well, we share an interest in this
yes.
market. What do you think the big things that are pushing change? And you mentioned one there that the intervals on services and there's real practical things. But how are you reading the market as a whole, the automotive market? What are the pressures?
I mean, they're coming from all sides. You know, you've obviously got the political world events that affect all of us at the moment, but specifically, you know, all the stuff with tariffs and things like that obviously has impact. But in the automotive industry, you know, you've got the move towards autonomous driving. You've got electrification,
Hydrogen is even coming into it a bit.
Yeah,
well, I think it is. I'm backing that.
Backing hydrogen. Okay. Yeah, you've got all these different changes in the market. So that creates lots of change, and that, you know, also increases fear and tension.
But opportunity as well.
Yes.
But there's a lot to navigate all the time, and it is shifting quite quickly.
Yes.
At the moment, the political piece is a huge one. So for a big organisation that's trying to navigate those, I mean, it's well placed to do so. It's been around for a long time.
Yes.
But it's manufacturing. It's got plants all over the world. So the tariffs one must be a hell of a headache at the moment. Without getting into that political aspect too heavily, why did you take the job? What excited you about it from a marketing challenge? It was because you probably didn't know all of those challenges before you started, but you do now. You've really got into it. But what attracted you to the opportunity?
So, I mean, the attraction was not necessarily sector-based. It never has been. But having worked in so many different sectors, in so many different industries, I know that there's some kind of opportunity in every one. And I hadn't worked in automotive before. I had work with oil companies and things like that before, but not specifically automotive. So there's always that interest value, that curiosity again, and I want to understand how this works. But it was also more because this specific role was around trying to really implement hybrid marketing practices. So, you know, this is an organisation that does have agency relationships, but it also has an internal resource. So I'm in charge of one of the teams underneath me is content strategy and delivery, along with digital strategy and delivery and planning. And so it's that opportunity now to really help develop that way of working across agency and in-house.
So you can feel like you can be a change maker in there and try and shift that methodology again and that culture of marketing. Is that the idea?
I mean, the whole gig is a transformation gig. So I was brought in to build this team from scratch. There wasn't an integrated marketing team before. This is a new team within a new marketing domain.
Do you know how thrilled I am to hear you saying people are investing in integrated marketing again? As an agency that has never moved off its proposition that integrated sits at the heart of everything, and we've gone through 30 years of people saying, no, you need to be the only way you can survive is be a specialist. I think it's really valuable to have, because you talked earlier about you don't often have those generalist big thinkers that can think across silos in these larger organizations. So is that part of your hope to create more broad thinkers within the business?
Yeah, so I introduced the integrated marketing planning role to this business. So that isn't a function that existed before, and so the idea of that role is to take every project from the original intake all the way through to reporting and measurement at the other end. And obviously I run the global team, and we have regional teams and local teams as well. And so we all have to work together to deliver the initiatives out into the market and measure them. But what I wanted to do is make sure that there was some kind of generalist at the core of this, not just project managing it, because obviously project management is one element to that role, but really being able to understand how we're going to activate across all of the channels, deep into the market, how we're going to measure it, and bring all of those aspects together. So yeah, that is really introducing that generalist role. But at the same time, obviously I've got a content strategy and delivery team, a digital strategy and delivery team, which is also bringing in the specialism. So I wanted to have, again, by having a leader for each of those teams, you've got someone who can be a bit more generalist, that looks overall at the content strategy
and pull
or the digital
levers
strategy.
And pull the levers of those specialists,
yes,
and bring them in the right. I think that's a really exciting opportunity to get involved with, because not many. I speak to a lot of people in your position in jobs like you, but not many have a remit to sort of make that change. Often they're inheriting architecture or the framework. So that's really cool. And how long have you been doing it? Where are you at? What are you excited about? And what are the big challenges?
So I only took on the role last August, so I'm coming back round for
fresh meat, everybody.
Yeah, nearly a year in the organisation.
New boy, still,
yes, and a huge amount of transformation. So in terms of where we are at the moment, we are still embedding that transformation. It takes a long time. It's very quick to make the organizational changes. You can put people in role and things like that very quickly, but it takes a lot more time, obviously, to embed the change, work out your workflows. And, I apply Agile thinking here as well. You've got to do it incrementally and iteratively improve. So, there is times when things don't go exactly as planned, or that, it looked good on paper, it was a good theory, but let's see how it works in the real world.
Put your hand up, and that's how you earn the faith that from the leadership. I mean, that a big conversation we have a lot with the marketing leaders is talking upstream and downstream, and you get into these positions where actually to do what you're doing, you're not just trying to bring the people that work below you with you. You're actually, probably almost more important, is trying to shift the culture and mentality of the whole organization, which is a huge thing to do. Have you got any tips for people who are sort of in that position? I mean, how do you start doing that, or how do you do it in a consistent way?
What, managing up and talking?
But yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, you need to understand what they're looking for. What value are they expecting out of your teams? And often I find, marketing may speak a different language than the business. And so marketing is often coming and saying, hey, I got awareness, I got likes, I've got shares.
And they don't recognize that.
Yeah, and the business is saying, I want to see return on investment, where's the money? And so you've got to kind of act as a translator in the middle, and you've got to get both sides to see it. And so being able to speak each side's language, I suppose, and act as a bit of an interpreter and get either side to see what the other one's view is probably the key. And so when it comes to managing up, I think there isn't enough at the moment in marketing. I don't see a lot of kind of understanding of how the business does want to communicate, in terms of money and things. And I think that's more challenging in businesses where you have an indirect sales model. Because traditionally the in-house team has been very focused on brand. And you need brand. It's not to say you don't need brand awareness. You obviously do. But there hasn't necessarily been consideration there of how you might measure the conversion, because as far as your team is concerned, we sell out to a distributor or sell into a distributor, and they sell out to the end customer, which may be a workshop.
The job's done once we've got the eyes on it, and the bosses don't see it like that because they're tracking that all the way through to end sale, I guess, and end completion.
Well, they are and they aren't, because, again, they can only track potentially depending on the business, and it's different in each business I've been in, and to different extents in any region. They will generally have better visibility of what they're selling to the distributor, but not necessarily seeing how that's being sold out into the market.
Okay.
Varying degrees of what you might have in different businesses. And so they themselves can't necessarily see it in real time. It's on a delay. If obviously the distributor doesn't restock, then it hasn't sold out. But that's quite a long delay between that. And if you think in traditional performance marketing, you're looking at trying to attribute sales to a particular activity. And so in e-commerce, it's the dream. Someone clicks through, they come to the site, they buy online, you fire some conversion pixel, you track it. And I listened to your previous podcast where
Frederick Boyson.
Yeah, around POAS.
It's an interesting, it's a really interesting idea, because it's not quite as clean as maybe you think it is, but you elevate that up into a different. Online sales is a lot cleaner.
Yes,
there are measurements. If you haven't listened to it and you're interested in how you really evaluate the performance of the spend that you're putting into advertising to drive footfall to your products on site, the Frederick Boyson pod is brilliant. But not all businesses are like that either.
Well, so that's what I'm trying to say. Getting to ROAS, return on ad spend, is difficult enough. Without starting to go down the profit on ad spend. I mean, I'd love to, and that's where, but. To achieve that, you generally need to be capturing all of the data over a sustained period of time to be able to potentially go into a marketing mix model.
Which is a hell of a job.
Yeah. And so, that's the type of thing I try and implement in a business. But you've got to start first with attribution modeling, then really incrementality testing, and then on to media mix modeling or marketing mix modeling.
So do you set up dashboards for that, which are understandable and that you can pull that information from and help people understand it? Because I'm sure I asked you how do you sell upwards, but you're right. It's perspectives on both sides of that. It's the same information that will mean something else to me as a creative director, but I still need it. as it is to the FD. But the closer you can get me to understanding his perspective, the more chance I've got of actually giving you something that makes you look awesome and does the job. So how do you manage that data, and how do you use it on a practical level with up and downstream?
Well, firstly, you've got to be able to get hold of the data. So the first major challenge is
Where's it
often the
coming
data
from?
is siloed, and particularly when you've got regional and local. It may not be in your ad account, or it may not be in your system. It may be in some other systems, or you may have legacy, technological systems that host the data. So first thing is to get all the data in one place and then bring visibility to it. I think the other big challenge is that people don't necessarily know the difference between KPIs and ROI. So often, they see any type of key performance indicator as the result, and use that, to a CFO to say that's our return on investment. That's not a return on investment. If it's not in financial terms, you can't really measure it as return on investment.
And the sad look on the face of the marketeer that says, I got 50,000 likes, and the FD goes, what are you talking? I couldn't give a toss. And it's such a shame because they've put so much effort in. Everyone's trying to do the same thing. But yeah, that translation piece, it's a really important role for a marketing leader now.
Yeah, and I think it's also about, you can use those metrics as leading indicators, but only if they do really genuinely have some correlation with the return on investment. So if likes do not translate into cash down the line, then it shouldn't be something we're necessarily reporting on, because likes.
But if you can track it through, then great. Let's accelerate likes, and we've got some way of understanding that.
Yeah, and I think I said to you before we came in here, it's focusing on the end, start with the end in mind. What is it you're trying to achieve, and work backwards from that. And so if you start there and you say, okay, well, how do we actually convert this sale? What are the routes they're going to use? How might we measure that? And then start to think about what might they have to have thought or done in order to get to that point. What is they think? What are they thinking and feeling before they proceed? And that also generally helps you also then understand what the metrics would be that probably would relate to each of those stages on the customer journey.
I would, in my world, I came from a design background and a creative background. It's the difference between decorating something and designing a solution, because if you don't know why you're making that bit red and that bit blue, no wonder the client or the boss goes, I'd prefer pink. And you've got no. So it really does matter, because if you're able as a creative in this conversation to say the choices that we've made are designed to reach that end goal because we've started at the end and worked backwards, then that really empowers the conversation and reduces reworks and reduces all of these sorts of things. And in a world where I'm sure lots of you out there are thinking, well, I'll just get AI to do a lot of this, it's going to get even more important to understand what the end goal is. Otherwise, we're all just going to make a load of old rubbish, basically, that just doesn't connect. How do you go about, with your teams or with the people that you work with, how do you go about setting that destination? How do you uncover a destination? Is it purely? It's not purely the money, I know that, but how do you do that to make it real for people?
I mean, I would usually coach them to start with the numbers. That's
it's a big part of it.
Yeah, because inevitably, what's the trigger for the initiative or the campaign or the program is someone has said we need to sell X million of product X in Y market. So that's the first place you've got to start. So then you need to work out, for example, well, what's the average sale value? What's the size of the market? Is there any particular segments in the market that will buy that, more or for more money than someone else? And so I suppose that, that's it. It's like teaching or coaching the questions to ask back to your stakeholders to capture the information that enables you to do the
brief.
role.
It's all about the brief.
Or the prompt in the future. It's the same thing. Whatever we put in a client brief is also what you're going to have to put in the prompt in the future.
I think it's one of our. I think many people come into our industry thinking that they just come up with ideas and that's what it is, and that's not what we do. We're trying to find a route through to that destination. I think any marketeer, creative or technologist worth their money is someone that's trying to understand the money and the destination they're going on. But often there is a big gap between the numbers at that end and the sort of activity at that end. And I think for juniors coming through, this is a really important point to get a handle on. The faster that you can get to grips that the only reason you got a job is you're meant to be generating income for the business, and that's okay. There's almost a sort of pushback against growth, and and I'm showing my age a bit, but when I'm working with a lot of the younger client partners and also my own team, you have to remind them that it's okay to it's okay to go after the money. That's what we're here to do. It's not just about reputation. It's not just about those other things that are so sexy and interesting at the moment, and purpose. They're really important handles to pull, but you decide how to pull those once you know where you're going and you've built that initiative. So I think it's probably one of the biggest challenges I think that the sector's got at the moment, staying focused on the money, and that's what will keep marketeers relevant. Otherwise, it will just go to business consultants, basically.
Well, even if you go back to some of your questions at the beginning about my background, I was very lucky. I had a boss very early on when I was doing the early social media stuff. So while I'm saying, like, we're going to do this thing, we're going to stand up for free and tell people how to do something. Why would we do that? Yeah. And he used to continuously
you always
have
need
a line.
The why.
He always said, "Show me the money." Every time I was like sitting down at his desk, I've got this really good idea. Show me the money, and like it stuck with me, and it was true. I sometimes had these great ideas in my head, but they didn't link to any money. And so that's just stayed with me. And obviously the sales background as well means that, I go back to that thinking, I was frustrated sitting there in a store selling orange mobile phones with the fact that the marketing director was coming up with these crazy ideas that did not relate to how we sold the product or how the customer bought them. And so that's what I wanted to change. And so I need to bring that thinking back all the time.
That line between the product and the customer. And I think a sales role is often... I've spoken about this before, so I won't go into it too much, but like I cut my teeth like holding ropes at boat shows and like doing demo work and flyering on the, I used to fly for clubs in Ibiza back in the day, all the way, and trying to get someone to go to Dave Pearce is a really hard sell. Sorry, Dave, if you're listening, but it's also... You just connect when you see that customer and you understand how they sneer, laugh, are joyful, the questions that they ask. I think every marketeer should be put on frontline sales at some point just to sort of get a handle on that and understand why they've got a job. That is the connection. So we're coming towards the end because we've got to. We learned our lessons from season 1. I said we keep them. We've already gone over our time, but it's good, and that's a good thing. But you sort of brought up something somebody told you there that you've held dear. Are there other lessons that you've learned that you would pass on now? Something someone said or things that you've just learned true that you could pass on to our listeners as something to take away? Yeah,
I mean, one of the ones that my business partner always used to say is, where does the little gorilla sleep?
Okay.
And then he...
This is a different one. I like it.
And it's where the large gorilla doesn't. And the reason I love it is because I often work with a challenger brand. The number 2 in the market or the number 3, or when I was working in small business, they were not going to be the biggest. And the temptation, and I see it all the time in these enterprise roles as well, is to focus on the bigger player and say, what are they doing? We need to do it. When actually, obviously, it's like, the kind of war situation we've got at the moment, like asymmetric war. You've got to play a different strategy than the big one, because obviously they're always going to outgun you with resources at the current level that you're at, because that's the whole reason that they are larger, is they've got more resources.
Creativity comes in.
Yeah.
I think that I love that because I think it was David Ogilvy. I think he had the Hertz account. And Hertz, or it might be Avis, and one of them was number 1, one of them's number 2, and he came out and there's the first advert that said proudly number 2 in the market, and then small it said we work harder, we'll do more, and we'll go to the ends of earth to make sure that I'll paraphrase that wrong, and I'll get people writing in maybe if you engage, but that idea of being a competitor and embracing that, I think is what I've always lived by, because we've always been the smaller guys pitching. We've always been there. So it's a really good piece of advice. Any other ones you want to drop in before we finish?
Again, I may misquote this, but I heard an author talking years ago, and I bought the book, but I didn't necessarily read the whole book. And it was all about the idea of the second bounce of the ball. And it's the idea
Okay.
that the first bounce of the ball is predictable. You can understand, and everyone is following that first bounce of the ball.
Everyone spent ages designing the first. Yeah.
So
the
everybody
first
is
bounce.
running after that destination, when actually if you can take a little bit more time to think about where the second bounce of the ball is going to go, that's usually where the real opportunity lies. So
to make you think further ahead, to
Yeah.
make you think past the end of a campaign or past the end of a project and think about a program. Is
Or
that
maybe-
the sort of idea?
or even in the industry, I think, if you apply it more to kind of how the world is changing around you,
Macro environment.
it's not just, it's already too late to go after where the ball is going to bounce first. You really want to be thinking about the next round of change that comes off the back of that. But equally also thinking about stuff that doesn't change. Again, I can't take the credit for that. My business partner, was always saying to me, I'm always very focused on all the things that are changing and, the opportunities that those present. But there is also a huge amount of stuff that, as you go into the future, doesn't change. And there's a lot of money to be made also by recognizing the stuff that is always going to be the same.
Yeah.
That people buy from people, for example, that doesn't go away. But people like
and we
authenticity.
talked earlier about authenticity and, in a world of simulated and, the role of real is, I think, going to increase in value, and we're going to have good opportunities there. I think that's a great way to round it off. And I want to thank you for giving us your time and coming down there. I'm going to watch with interest on how things go at ZF, but thank you for being part of the UnEDited podcast. And is there anything else you want to say? Can people get in touch? Are you interested in people getting in touch with you, or would you rather they leave you alone?
No, I'm quite happy for people to get.
And how
get
would
in
they
touch.
do that?
LinkedIn is probably the easiest one. Yeah, you
That
can find me on
community
LinkedIn.
worked in the end. Well, thanks very much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me, Ed.
That's a wrap on another episode of UnEDited. Make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications so you never miss an episode. Find all of our updates on your favourite social media and podcast platforms. Just search for the UnEDited podcast.